Hello and welcome to the Final Frontiersmen, a YouTube channel celebrating all things Star Trek with a heavy focus on the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game by Modiphius. I am your host Bill, taking you on this review of, at this moment, the latest release in the Star Trek Adventures line, the Star Trek Lower Decks Campaign Guide. And let me tell you, not only am I recommending this, which is probably clear from the start, I recommend everything because they are so good, but this is quite possibly one of the most important books to be released to date. And it sounds like I say a lot of high praise a lot every time I do a review, and I think Modiphius keeps one-upping themselves with each release. But honestly, I think that when I finally go back and I update my buyer's guide for the Star Trek Adventures series, and even the recommendations for new GMs, I think this book is going to be at the top of the list, and it's going to be, for me, when I'm answering questions on social media, I'm going to be recommending this, especially to new GMs, but all GMs out there, I think, should have this book. And there's a ton for players to get out of this, too. This book amazed me. And I want to say it struck me very much like the Star Trek Discovery guide for Star Trek Adventures, which I know a lot of people passed up because there's a lot of negative feelings for the series Discovery. But just like the Discovery book, this is full of so much information, not just about the TV series Lower Decks, but about the entire Star Trek universe at that time. And it fleshes out so many details that you can add an enormous amount to your games that just gives so much depth, and it has absolutely no connection with the series itself, be it Lower Decks or Discovery. This book is that good, and I hope I'm able to articulate that through this review. Now, as this is a review, we are going to use the usual alert system that we have here. The yellow alert for things that we think are interesting, the red alert for the things we think are great, and the rarely used black alert for things that are game changers. This review might actually be, I don't know without going back, but this might be my most alert heavy review I've ever done, because there's so much that just jumps out from this guide and blew me away. It impressed me. So without further ado, let me get into it. Let me jump into the small window down in the corner, put some art, put some hopefully appropriate images up on the main viewer, and let you look at that. So we are going to start right at the beginning. Who would have thought? We're going to start Chapter 1, State of the Galaxy. And guess what? I am starting off with a red alert for this chapter. Maybe not every last detail in the chapter earns the red alert, but the majority does. So I'm probably just going to leave it up through the entire talk. So let me tell you why. State of the Galaxy red alert. This is really our first big detailed glance at the Star Trek universe post-Nemesis. We pick up with Lower Decks, which is a few years after Nemesis. We get Star Trek Picard, which is a couple decades after Lower Decks. But we don't really know the details. What exactly happened after Nemesis? What exactly happened after the Dominion War? What happened when Voyager returned? What were the big moments and the little moments that were shaping the galaxy after these huge, momentous events rippled through the Star Trek universe? And this chapter gives us a lot of detail of what Starfleet was like, how they started to regroup after the war, their new focus, and what's bringing them into the year 2381, about where Lower Decks starts. So it is so useful, especially for GMs, to get a good grip on what the galaxy is like at this point in time that we didn't get to see on TV, because after Voyager, we went into Enterprise, we went into the prequel. So we never really got to flesh out this moment that happened between Voyager's return and the end of the TNG movies to when Lower Decks is taking place years later. So for the fans too, this will be a lot of great detail. This will be a lot of information that you could use for your own stories, even if you're not going to tell a role-playing story. If you're just making up your own canon in your head, telling your own fan fiction, there is so much in here. And that's what I love about it, which again, like the Discovery book, it, without even connecting to the TV series, it fleshes out that period of time between Enterprise and the original series to give you, as a GM, as a player, as a gamer, so much more to work with. And I love that. And that was the best way to open this guide, this campaign book. Perfect start. I was gripped every page, reading through, reading the details. And of course, a lot of it we've seen on TV, we've heard, we've seen mentioned throughout the series as they're coming up. But this is the first time it's really collating it into one space, so you could read it as if it's like the old Star Trek encyclopedia from way back when. So I love that. The other thing that this chapter does, just like the Lower Deck series, is it really gives a lot of detail on the Pakleds. It fleshes them out, and it doesn't make them a joke, even though they are kind of played as comic relief in the series, and they're a bit of a goofy one-off alien back in TNG. But just like Lower Decks, you see they have become a threat, and they've become a threat because people underestimate them. They do not seem like someone you should worry about, and that's their strength. It's also one of their weaknesses, of course, because they are flawed, but they aren't dumb like people think they are. They are a threat, and Lower Decks shows that with a humorous slant, but this chapter really gives you a lot of in-depth detail on how that society is, how they behave, and how they manage to, in the background while the Dominion War is going on, become a power and a threat to be reckoned with. It's really impressive. So I really loved reading this opening chapter. It wasn't dry at all. It was just full of ideas. It's full of plot hooks. It is full of detail for the Trekkie, not even just the gamer. There's another thing that appears in this chapter that it really could have appeared later, and I should really talk about later when I get to the appropriate part. But since it's in chapter 1, I'll mention it. It has a sidebar. This book is full of sidebars, but it has a great sidebar about the Temerian language. You know, the language from the episode Darmok, the people who speak in metaphor. It has a little sidebar of the meaning, or the Temerian metaphor, plus the translation to what it means, which is, if you think about it, like, that's really fun. You get an opportunity to start working in this really unique species, this unique language into your games. I will say I'm not sure I agree with the exact translations they gave to some of these metaphors, and I know there is no exact translation in the series. They chose basically a very direct, common, this is basically what it means. They tried to connect it with other metaphors that we may know in English. I'd say there's some situations where it does imply, but to me, that's also the beauty of the Temerian language, that it's not always going to mean exactly this. There's a lot of context in it. So depending on when it's said, how it's said, where it's said, to who it's said, the context of the conversation, just like a lot of Earth languages, the meaning it's going to convey is going to be slightly different. Just like in English, when you emphasize one word in a sentence, it kind of changes the entire meaning. Like if I say that man is my father, okay, that's very clear. That man is my father. If I say that man is my father, then the emphasis goes to I'm pointing out one specific person. That man is my father. Okay, so this one is a man. So you're emphasizing a certain part. So I think the Temerian language is similar in that respect, that it is metaphor, but the context is key to how exactly that translation is going to come in, even though the translation is going to be basically the same. But I love that. The chapter also has notable worlds, the planets that we see explored in Lower Decks. So you have a lot more worlds to explore. I like the Pac-Led planet has a trait strong. Of course it does. So it's a fun chapter. It's a strong opening. And it sets the tone because this book just shoots for the stars and it reaches it. Allow me to go on. End the red alert for now. Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is Starfleet Operations. This focuses more on the support operations, because in Lower Decks, the Cerritos, their crew, they handle support. They do second contact, not first contact. So this chapter goes into those details of the ships that maybe are not on the front lines of the exploration and making the breakthroughs, but they are coming in and playing backup to the ships, like the Enterprise that goes out and they make that first contact. Now the Cerritos comes in and follows up and does the hard work of establishing these connections, of spending more time getting to know the species, getting to interact with them, setting up the interactions diplomatically between them. And one of the sections that it has in there, I am giving yellow alert. It's called Swabbing the Decks, and this is a really great chapter to help inform your roleplay, inform your vision of what life is like on the starship. It gives duties, assignments, duty shifts, the alpha shift, beta shift, delta shift, gamma shift, if you have 4 shifts on your crew. It talks about dealing with death. And also, like we see humorously implied in the series, on dealing with resurrection. And it gives a chart of how maybe people could be resurrected based on what we've seen through dozens of episodes in Star Trek where crew members come back, or they weren't dead, or it's from a parallel universe. We got a replacement. Hello, Harry Kim. So it's a really nice glimpse into the life of what it's like to be an officer on a ship, and especially a ship in this supporting role. So I think a lot of players and GMs are going to get a lot out of that. An interesting thing it does bring up that didn't really think about, but it had families serving together aboard the ship, and what it would be like if not like Next Generation or the Enterprise D, where there's families living on there necessarily, but also maybe family crew members working together. On Lower Decks, you have Mariner and her mother, Captain Freeman. They're working there. It gives a little rule that I like, that when the ship's in danger, it could apply a negative trait onto you if you have family on the ship, because now your family's in danger. So that might be distracting you from your job. Really, really clever insight, really good way of going deeper into something we see on Star Trek, but we don't really think about, or necessarily think about what that implies in the game. So I was really impressed with that. This chapter also covers transfers and reassignments, of what they mean, what's the difference between the two, and how to handle them in your game. We see in Lower Decks characters sampling different departments, trying to find out where they fit in better. So this gives you a lot of information, a lot of detail about how you could handle that in your own game. It also goes into Division 14 from a very fun episode of Lower Decks, where Starfleet officers are people who are suffering from highly unusual medical problems, illnesses, and injuries, they go to the farm, Division 14, where they are treated before, if they are treatable, before they're sent back to duty. And it also has a random table that you can roll of the strange, rare, weird, unusual illness that might be befalling your crew. This book, I want to say, because I might forget to say it later, this is full of so many random tables. If you're a fan of random tables, and a lot of them are fun, a lot of them are really fun. I like these kind of random tables. Usually I don't like random tables for things like creating a character, creating a planet, things like that. I really want to put my own thought, my own creativity, my own ideas into. But something really fun like an injury, and like, how did it happen? Like, what is the effect of this strange, unusual condition? Things like that are fun to just roll and mix and match and just come up with out of the blue for me. So I like that, and there's a lot of tables like that throughout this book that I had fun reading through. And I had to stop myself reading through them all. So I technically didn't read all the random tables, even this one here about the injuries, because I want to do it later when I'm playing the game and it comes up, because I want to roll. I want to be surprised and think, oh my God, what are we going to do with this condition? So I thought that was really fun. I think you'll get a kick out of a lot of the tables throughout this book. But that is Chapter 2, Starfleet Operations. Next, Chapter 3, which is a very fitting follow-up. This is the Lower Decks. Now we are getting into the daily life of being a lower decker. You're not a senior officer. You're not one of the ones with authority. This is what your life is like as a newcomer on the ship, as an ensign, maybe lieutenant junior grade. This is what life for you is going to be like, not the Captain Picard lifestyle. It gives you so many details that you can think about. And again, this whole book is about fleshing out your role play. So you could think about, what would I be doing as this kind of an officer? What kind of job would I be given? What kind of duties would I be responsible for at my level? This chapter explains a lot of that, or gives you a lot of ideas that you could play with. One of the interesting ideas it throws in there that I think GMs might be able to play with is something we've seen in the series, using promotion as punishment. Because a lot of the lower deck characters, they like the kind of laid back lifestyle, Mariner especially, she's the target of this in the episode, where she gets promoted, so she's given a lot more responsibility, and now she doesn't have that free time. She doesn't have the luxury. She's doing things she doesn't want to do because she is a higher rank. So it's a fun twist on things. We think of the Starfleet officers, oh, I want to become a captain. I want to become a commander. I want to get as much responsibility as possible. This is a lower decks guide, so it's a flip. Maybe you don't want that responsibility. Maybe you want to keep the easy lifestyle and just have fun in your free time and just not have to worry about dealing with the queue when they pop up. You can just hide down in the lower decks. That was fun. Speaking of which, since we're talking about free time, it talks about downtime activities and what your character could get into in their downtimes, the kind of things they could do for fun. This has along with those downtime activities, using the holodeck, but not just using it, it gives you a little bit of rules for creating your own holodeck programs. Again, this is completely optional. This is not something you need to have. It's something up until now you could just hand wave away. But for episodes like where Badgie, the psychotic, dangerous, deadly, anthropomorphic badge character was created because of poor programming, computer glitches, holodeck malfunction, so you could give your character time. Maybe they want to design their own holo novel, and you give them this extended task. They're programming it, and glitches could arise that they won't actually know what the glitches do until they pop up as the program's running. So it's a fun sidetrack, additional rule that you could add to the game. Really fun stuff. It also mentions, because Lower Decks does have probably more than any other Star Trek series, how to handle nudity in Star Trek, and how to talk to your players, make sure everybody's comfortable with what you're doing. If you're going to have moments of nudity or flashing or just exposure, for comedic value or for dramatic value, like you see in Lower Decks, it gives you a little pep talk as a GM of how to handle this, and see if your crew, your players, are down with that. Now, I have another yellow alert to throw on here. This is not just the Lower Decks perspective for Starfleet. These guides now are coming out to make sure that they are universal to use with whatever you're running. With the Klingon book, you could be running Klingon campaign. With the player's guide, you could be running a completely non-Starfleet campaign. Anything is open, so the book covers that as well. And it gives you little sections of the perspective, what Lower Decks life is like on Klingon ships, what the Lower Decks on the Pakled ship is like, on the Borg, which we saw the clip in the episode. But this actually fleshes out what that means to be a Lower Deck on the Borg. I thought that was great. Not going to spoil it for you. But yeah, there is a Lower Decks for Borgs. So check that out. Vulcans, Andorians, Ferengi, and Tellarites. They all get sectioned here to let you know what a Lower Decker in those polities would be experiencing on their own ships. Really good for role-playing, really inspirational to help you decide what maybe other Lower Deckers in different species, different polities might be like that aren't included in here. So I gotta hand it to them. They really dropped a lot of useful, creative information into this chapter. Backing out of the yellow alert for a brief moment, there are also lists of jobs that I mentioned at the beginning, but it has a huge list of what your Lower Decker might be responsible for as a member of the crew. It's not just going and cleaning and just waiting for orders. You would probably be given a job that you are responsible for. Or maybe the next shift you're responsible for this, or whatever the assignments might be. But it gives you so many duties that are available on the starship that your character might be responsible for. It's literally a huge list. It's very long, it's very detailed, and it's a lot of things I can guarantee you have not thought of. A lot of research has been put in, I believe, into the kind of jobs that people on ships, on huge crews, have to do when they're serving in the military. It certainly looks that way, but you can pull so many ideas out of this. I'm jumping back to a yellow alert for the next point, because as I mentioned, there are tons of random tables in this book, but one I just have to point out. I'm sorry, this one, because just following up on what I'm talking about of Lower Deckers getting jobs, getting tasks that they're responsible for, but also they are being commanded by their superiors. There is a random table called Menial Tasks for Junior Officers. You roll D20 3 times, and it goes, grab that, you get an item, you get a tool, and get to the action you have to perform with that item, that whatever is being affected by it. So, for example, let me just grab one right here. I'm looking at the chart. I love this. So your superior officer runs in, you roll the dice 3 times, and superior officer says, Ensign, grab that emitter module and get to recharging that power junction. Right there, you got your technobabble thrown in here. The technobabble chart is one of the best things in the operations division book, one of the best random charts in there. Now you get a technobabble drill sergeant screaming in your face. Love it. Love it so much. That's another definite yellow alert. I think a lot of GMs, a lot of players will like doing that. And even if you're not playing Lower Decks, even if you're playing a standard game, you as a player could use that just to bark orders at the lower decks characters in your game, the NPCs or the supporting characters in your game. So use that chart. There's so many good charts in this. I'm sorry. It has also side mission random tables, so you can roll what kind of side mission your character would be thrown into. There's so many tables going in here, and I might as well just come right back. Yellow alert again. I don't even know why I'm turning it off, but talking about having your superior officers barking commands, giving you orders, doing things. This is again a lower decks book. So you are the POV of this book is to play as a lower decker. Well, if you're a lower decker, you don't really have supporting characters per se, because in the standard game, you are most likely a senior officer or you have a lot of responsibility. So you have a supporting character, which by the core rules is somebody lower rank than you that you can use to support your character. That's the supporting character rule in the core rulebook. Well, this is reverse. You are now playing the character that would be that supporting character. So they have a very clever reversal on the supporting character mechanic in the core book. It's called supervising characters. It's the exact same mechanic, but now you are creating a secondary character who is your superior, who outranks you. So if you need to flesh out your game with more characters, you don't have enough players, or you need somebody with more authority than what your character has in that scene, you could create a supervising character and play that just like you would in the reverse, playing a supporting character. So now you have the guy that can give the orders instead of the guy who's taking the orders. Really nice, and you might say not necessary. No, it's not, but it's very thematic, and it's the same rule, but it's at least sticking with the theme of this book, so you can play 100% lower deck style game without having to tweak the rules, because it's already built in with the tweak. Loved it. Now we're moving on to chapter 4, Science and Technology, and oh my god, what's that on the horizon? That looks like another red alert. I love this chapter, Science and Technology. This chapter, it's amazing. It's full of so much scientific information and details on spatial phenomena that you can use in the game, how they apply mechanically into the game. This book, this chapter especially, but this book acts as a supplement to so many of the books that have been released thus far in the Star Trek Adventures line. So this chapter right here supplements not just what we get in the core book about anomalies and spatial phenomena, but it also supplements what we see in the science division book that talks about spatial phenomena. This supplements what we see in the Shackleton Expanse campaign guide, where it talks about all the really unique, odd, and dangerous anomalies in the Shackleton Expanse and the rules and mechanics to apply to them if you use that in the game. This does the exact same thing. It gives you more detail, more to design into your actual science problems, your scientific conundrums that come up in the game. For me, I love this because I don't know if I'm good at anything, but I think, in my opinion, one of my better skills at storytelling is creating more interpersonal and human drama stories. I don't think I'm very good at creating scientific and just phenomena style problems for the players to deal with. I love science, I love anomalies, the spatial phenomena, but I don't think I'm really well versed in creating great gripping stories for that. Chapters like this help people like me so much because I love the science and I love reading about it, and this has given me the ideas how to use it in an exciting way that I could build a whole episode out of this anomaly, this phenomenon. It is so detailed. I love it. I can't recommend it enough. And it also has rules about creating your own creatures. This one's not a random table. It tells you the mechanics, almost like building a starship, almost like building a character. If you want to have your own alien beast or creature that pops up on the planet somewhere, this walks you through step by step what to think about, how to design it to get that image in your head of what you need into the game. I think back to a couple of the episodes that I've uploaded from our campaign, Star Trek Next Frontier, where we had a science problem, where I had an alien creature. I'm thinking, how would I have designed it differently with this information now that I didn't have back when I did those games like 2 years ago, 1 year ago, whatever it was. So I am so grateful to have this chapter now, and I'm going to be referencing it so much in the future. That is a definite red alert for me. This is a strong chapter for this material. Highly recommended. Please check it out. Chapter 5. Now, Chapter 5, it has 2 parts, new life paths and the tools and weapons. Going with the new life paths, which are the new species that you could play as introduced in here, I have to. This is a black alert for me. And the more I thought about, when I was reading the book and reading through it, I thought, this is a red alert. This is definitely going to be red alert when I do the review. When I went back and skimmed through the whole book again, going through and just looking section by section, paragraph by paragraph, when I got back to this part, after refreshing myself of what came before and now seeing what is here, it reminded me of just how unique and how amazing this chapter is. Let me tell you what's in this chapter for the new life paths. These are the new species you could play as in character creation. The Apergosians, again, a lower decks alien. Cetaceans, the beluga whales, the dolphins that we see, that were on the Enterprise, but we never met, that have been part of Star Trek lore, we never met. The cetaceans. The clickets, the insectoid race we see in lower decks. Exocomps. Okay, the AI machine robot, artificial sentient life robots. Gorn. Not the Strange New Worlds Gorn, but the rubber Gorn. Kalons. Very, very far back reach into TNG. Packleds themselves, if you want to play as a Packled. And the Temerians. The Temerians with their metaphor language that we talked about earlier. Those 8. This is the most diverse and interesting set of species that you could play as, combined into one place and introduced into this game system. Think about it. Insects, dolphins, sentient repair droids, basically, the Gorn themselves, and the Temerians with a language unlike anything we've seen before, plus very fascinating aliens in the Apergosians, the Clicket, and the Kalon. There is so much originality, and just I don't know the right word I want to use, but this takes character creation, the kind of characters you could play as, in such a different direction. These are combined, especially, unlike so many of the other species that we get in the other books, which we are very familiar with, which, as different as they are, as interesting as they are, there's not a lot of difference from humanity. Until we get here, we get so many packed into one. You could run a game with these species that are unlike any Federation crew we have ever seen, playing their interactions, how they operate on the ship in such a unique way. Floating droids, swimming cetaceans, Temerians that use, your players are creating new metaphors to try explain situations for them. This could be the most unique Star Trek series ever created for whoever wants to jump in, grab this crew of 8 species and make your own STA series. It would be amazing, and I would love to see it. I can't wait until a player pulls one of these, hopefully more, brings it into our game either as a main character or as a supporting character. I want to see some of these races in play. I want to see some of these characters get used to the fullest. This is a black alert by far. This is a breath of fresh air and just exciting character creation options that Star Trek Adventures needs. It wasn't lacking for interesting characters, but it did not have anything this unique until now. I think the only thing that could have made this even more over the top would be having a Horda crew member. Maybe in the expansion, we'll see. But my word, what you're getting in this book for players, for character creation, this is astounding. And I know these might not all be everyone's cup of tea, but think of what it means for the bigger picture. That's a black alert for me. There's a very small section after that on tools and weapons. A lot of the interesting and odd items we see throughout the first few seasons of the series. And also some of the weapons, like pack-led weapons. And you even get the rapier from a very odd episode of the original series. But really, that chapter is about the new life path options. And my word, that is so good. Okay. Moving on, Chapter 6. Chapter 6, why don't I just surprise everyone and tell you there's an alert here. Red alert. Red alert for Chapter 6. This is the game mastering chapter. Now, here is... I was debating whether this gets a black alert too, but I think red alert is appropriate for this. This chapter, this is why I say at the beginning, I think I'm going to recommend this book, especially for new GMs, and even more especially for GMs who are not familiar with Star Trek or maybe not expert on Star Trek. I would say you buy a core book, you get the Game Master's Guide, and you get this book here, because Chapter 6, Game Mastering, this is probably the biggest support for how to run a truly Star Trek filling game that we've gotten since all the advice packed into the Game Master's Guide, which is great advice. But this basically gives you a toolbox to show you want to run a game that feels like Star Trek? Here it is. And the reason why is it starts out with tropes. And the tropes are 8 pages long. It's just trope after trope of things you see in Star Trek a lot. Things like transporter malfunctions. The sensors suddenly don't work. On the universal translator works perfectly until these situations. These are all the little details that pop up again and again and again throughout every single Star Trek series, that when you see it, you know, oh, yep, of course that's going to happen because it's Star Trek. That always happens in Star Trek. So if you're a GM that doesn't really know what Star Trek feels like, maybe you didn't see so many episodes, maybe your players want to play STA, but you don't know Star Trek that well and you're worried, how can I make it feel like Star Trek? This chapter lays out the tropes, gives you examples that we've seen on TV to flesh it out so you know what that means, and you could even visit those episodes. And it tells you how to use them. This is so good and so helpful to just, even if you know Star Trek, just to remind you, like, oh yeah, I should do something like that. We haven't had a holodeck malfunction yet. Let's do a holodeck episode. Or, oh, how about have the transporters twin somebody for no good reason? So check it out. Again, it doesn't have to be comedic. This book, it is Lower Deck, so there is a comedy element built into that series, but this book is built to run with any series that you are doing. And this chapter, again, I recommend for all GMs and especially GMs who are not entirely encyclopedic with their knowledge of Star Trek, but you really want to get that Star Trek feel, my word, this chapter is for you. And I'm already on the next page of my notes. Oh my goodness. Cutting the red alert, the chapter does end with the word escapes me. I'm gushing too much on the last thing. The mission briefs. Oh my goodness. The mission briefs, the one-page story ideas, not full-fledged adventures, but the one-page mission snippets, the briefs that you could use to either add to your campaign or flesh out into its own episode or mesh together with another story to create something bigger. It has 12 mission briefs. They're all aimed at lower decks games, but of course you can modify it to play anything. I've only skimmed them. If you watch my other reviews, you know I really don't read the adventures. I really don't read the mission briefs that much because I don't like mudding up my own thoughts. Because if I see a good idea, and there are good ideas, I did skim them and I like a lot of what I saw. If I see a good idea, I'm going to get hooked. I'm going to want to use it. I'm going to start tweaking it. And I think, oh, well, the idea is right there. Why don't I use it? But I like making my own stories. They do more personally to distract me. So I can't give you reviews of each individual mission brief and later the adventures. But I'll tell you, for those of you who want the briefs, who like using the briefs, you got 12 directed at lower decks to work with here. You could get a whole season out of those 12 if you wanted to. Let's move on. Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is pretty straightforward. It's starships, starbases, and vehicles. You're going to get in this the ships, the California class, which appeared already in the lower decks crew pack as the Cerritos, which is also in here. You're going to get the Luna again, which we've already had introduced to us before, I believe twice before. You're going to get the Osler class, an Andorian ship. The Obena, I thought was Obina, but then I watched the video explaining it's actually the Obena. So the Obena class, which is an updated Excelsior style ship. The Parliament class, the Tkalat, I don't know if I'm saying that right, it's a Vulcan ship, and the Ganesha, I believe is a combined Andorian Tellarite vessel. So those are the new ships that are in there. Not all of them new, but those are what we've seen in the series, so it gives you access to them. It also shows you notable ships that have appeared in lower decks. If you want to have those ships appear in your games, it gives you the stats for them. It also has stations too. So like the Douglas type station, like the massive, bigger than the Earth space dock from the movies, that style of Federation's space station. Gives you a whole section on the pack-led ships and their clump ships. Even gives you rules for how to build your own clump ships in the game. And then there's also a smattering of ships from the other polities that we see in lower decks. The Galrakian, the Hesperian, the Clicket, Klingon, Drukmani. And then it ends with ground vehicles, because there's a lot of ground vehicles like buggies and hover cars that you see in the series. So you now get options to use those, and even how to build them. It talks about if you want to build your own, like in the Utopia Planitia, how you would do it for ground vehicles. Next, Chapter 8. Chapter 8 is Allies and Adversaries. This is another very straightforward chapter. You get a lot of the guest characters, the main characters who appeared in the series, including Captain Gomez, who originally started in The Next Generation. You get Ensign Fletcher from a very memorable first season episode, Captain Ramsey and the her crew from, what was it, USS Oakland, I think. Boimler's ex-girlfriend, Lieutenant Brinson, and a lot of the other species lower deckers, so the Vulcan lower deckers, the Klingon lower deckers, I believe. You also get Kazinti, so I'm going to give that a yellow alert, actually. Kazinti, and with a little snippet guide if you want to make your own Kazinti character. It's not a full-fledged life path like we have elsewhere in the book, but at least gives you that option, so if you want to play as a Kazinti. So I thought that was pretty good. Okay, bye-bye, Yellow Alert. Uh, Again, Klingon Pack-like characters, also the characters we see, including the Pack-like Queen, the Emperor, like the different Packlets that appeared on the ship. You got stats for them. Other strange NPCs like the Anabaj, the kind of lizard looking monster thing that wants to lay eggs in your throat, which also I will, why not, I'll give a yellow alert for that, because it also gives a snippet to help you if you want to create that as your own character too, or just create a character with that. Again, not full-fledged life path, but interesting to have that option. I wonder what that would be like having a Starfleet character. And back to the Black Alert, having that as a character serving on the ship, I don't know what that means. The Galrakians, Taxor, I think that was one, and there's just others who have appeared throughout the few seasons of Lower Decks. This chapter ends with Beasts and Creatures. That includes the AI, the Jeffrey Combs AI, the Agamus, Armus, the Skin of Evil that killed Lieutenant Yar. He appeared in the series, so he's here. The Mugato, is that even how you say it? I don't even know. I just keep thinking of Will Ferrell from Zoolander. Salt vampires, and just like all the other crazy creatures, including the dog. So there's a lot of fun stats and creatures you can pull for your game here, in addition to earlier having rules on how to build your own creatures. And the last chapter, which extremely brief, chapter 9, mini campaign. This is a 3 adventure mini campaign designed for lower deckers, designed for lower deck players. Of course, modifiable if you want to have senior officers in there too. As I said, I skimmed through it. I read a couple parts here and there, but I usually, as always, back away from pre-made adventures. So please don't rely on me for reviews on this kind of material. You kind of have to go to other sources or read it yourself. I do recommend reading it yourself. And that is the book. I think this is the fastest I've ever read a Star Trek Adventures book. It's roughly 250 pages, and I tore through it, and then I went through it a second time to prepare for this review. I was impressed the first time, and the second time really hammered in how good it was that I didn't appreciate the first time through because it was all new to me. But getting to the end and going back and seeing it again from the start, it really laid the foundation down that this is going to be a key book I will be recommending for the foreseeable future, especially to new game masters and new game masters who want to know more about running Star Trek, what Star Trek is like. And this book does it for you, not just for chapter 6 with game mastering that gives you all the tropes, but with all the insight it gives you on what it's like to live and work on the ship and the tiny minute details that you have to deal with when you are at that lower end of the food chain. This book is so darn good, and I didn't even touch on the discussions of using comedy in your games in a lower decks way, which it does go into. It gives you advice on how to do this, but as always, these books are made universal to use for all of your campaigns, no matter if you're Starfleet, non-Starfleet, comedy, serious, whatever you're doing. Just like the Discovery book that unfortunately not enough people, I think, gave a chance. This really, it's punching far, far, far above its weight. This book is amazing, and it's just following the tradition of Modiphius releasing great book after great book. The writers, the creators, everyone who contributed to this, it has a lot of flavor. I'm not even getting into the little comedic bits and the little snippets of the crew throughout there. I want you to experience those on your own. But as a guide, this is, I said to my friends, this is top tier Star Trek Adventures resource right here. This is one of the best. I highly recommend it. I highly recommend it, again, to new GMs especially. This is going to be referenced by me many, 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 many times as we go on, probably more than most of the other books that I have on the shelf that you can't see because of my background. But thank you very much. I hope this helped you understand what you will find in this book. If you so choose to buy it, I recommend that you do, but you have to decide what's best for your own game, your own campaign, and your own players. But if I could be of help, that's all I can ask for. So if you have any comments, if you have your own opinions and suggestions, please write a comment to me down below, or find us on Twitter at The Final FM. Also on Instagram, barely, but we're still there, The Final FM. Please talk. We want to get to know what you think. We want to talk to you about the game and about Star Trek. But thank you so much for sticking with me. I know I'm approaching an hour, but this book is packed full of stuff, and I'm a rambler. But I hope you will catch our videos in the future. We got a lot planned, a lot coming up, and just stay safe out there. So thank you again. Live long and prosper. As always, peace and long life. We'll see you.